Charles, what do you think about the EU possibly banning proof of work? Will Bitcoin and Ethereum take a hit? I mean, there's been certainly some conversations about it. It's puzzling to me because people in the proof of work world live in this bizarre reality where all the energy spent on Bitcoin doesn't seem to exist. It's as if we have unlimited energy, and this is the best possible use case of it. Um, they don't acknowledge that there's a high energy consumption. It's there, you acknowledge it. Now, they seem to conflate the idea that this is, in their view, useful or productive use of energy with the concept that we are at an energy deficit in the world. And what we're doing is we're taking the battery that millions, if not billions of years of vegetation gave us from fossil fuels, and we're rapidly expending that battery to power the entire world. We don't have a sustainable power grid. So we're running an energy deficit for production relative to consumption when you look at renewable to non-renewable sources. And part of that deficit now is the Bitcoin network. And so a lot of policymakers are saying, well, first we need to rebalance these things and make more or equivalent to what we spend. So we have a surplus or neutrality. So some form of renewable energy source. Okay. And energy enters the system all the time. It's called the sun. And at the same time, we also need to conserve large energy expenditures. So people go, for example, to the concrete business, and because it's a huge consumer of electricity, or the metallurgy people, so the steel people, these types of things. They say, you guys consume aluminum, same, huge amounts of electricity, massive amounts of power to do what you do from the whole cycle in the supply chain. We need to find a way to reduce that and make what you do more environmentally friendly. So that's what regulators do to industries. So then you look at the blockchain business and you see Bitcoin and Ethereum and Cardano and Solana and all these other things, and they do some things. And then there's a question of efficiency behind the things that they do. The problem with maximalism is what they do is they say it is incomparable what they do. So even though Cardano and Bitcoin are both UTXO-based systems, both have deflationary monetary policies, both process transactions and move value, both use cryptography, and both are functionally cryptocurrencies, what the Bitcoin people do is say proof of stake simply does not work. Everything on Cardano is an elaborate proof of perpetual motion scam, and it's a plutocracy controlled by central bankers, or whatever the latest argument is. In other words, we're not legitimate. We don't exist. We should be ignored. And now, if that argument doesn't stand, then they run into a very inconvenient truth. You have system A that uses more power than Ecuador, and system B that uses the power of a warehouse, and one is better, faster, and cheaper, mine. So that's a problem. Okay. So this is one of those uncomfortable conversations with the European Union while they talk about proof of work. And they say, okay, well, if you have two industries within an industry, if you have two approaches and one is massively more energy efficient than the other, the one that's not has to justify itself in some way. So what is it? Is it more security? Well, that's debatable because all these papers have been written and these systems are running and they've never been hacked for years, with plenty of people trying to do that. Is it in some way more efficiency, or it's more egalitarian, or it's more decentralized, whatever that means? But we have no index for decentralization. So I think it's premature and bad for the EU to ban proof of work, but it does bring in an interesting conversation, which is the European Union, by just asking the question, forces many inconvenient, uncomfortable conversations to come into play. What if a useful proof of work exists? We've written a paper for that. So does that matter? Maybe we have to move from useless to useful. Would it being a distributed computer actually, instead of just a Rube Goldberg machine that wastes electricity, would that make people feel better? So I don't think Bitcoin and Ethereum will take a hit at all. I think that just like China banning Bitcoin really didn't do anything to the ecosystem. But I do think it is a wake-up call for the astute listener to really start talking about comparability within industry. Because if you use analogy, if I have two ways of making concrete, and one way involves burning all the forest down, and the other way is sustainable and uses sunlight and I can do it forever and not destroy the environment. I mean, which one would you pick? And if the people who say burning all the forest down, it somehow keeps the evil spirits away, whereas the sunlight attracts them, or it's a scam. It's like you have the same piles of concrete on both sides. The burden eventually follows on them. And actually, the Ethereum crowd admits this, which is why they're moving to a proof of stake based system. And it's my belief that over time, the majority of value in the cryptocurrency space will actually be protected by proof of stake style systems as opposed to proof of work style systems. And they say, well, that's equivalent to central banking and it's an oligarchy. No, it's not a plutocracy or oligarchy. Central bank system, I can't go to an exchange and buy part of the Federal Reserve and have a say in the governance of the Federal Reserve. At any given time, for any proof of stake coin with liquidity, I'm always able to acquire some of that power of the system and have a say over its governance. And ASICs are not necessarily a fair game. What if the primary ASIC supply chain is patented and private? You're not allowed by law to replicate what they've done. You'll have to spend millions to tens of millions to hundreds of millions to replicate what they've done. And they have first access to it. Is that an egalitarian democratic system? Used to be different. When I first joined Bitcoin back in the day, we could mine on CPUs. So this computer right here, or GPUs. And I even did. I had a Crossfire 45850 AMD cards. I was running 1.2 gigahashes. It's great times. So it was very egalitarian back then. But now, not as much. It's a little harder to get your hands on these things reliably, especially during a chip shortage. It tends to stay in certain areas, certain friends and family. Not to say it won't get better, but it just gives you a sense of the nuances of these things. And by the way, Cardano is not mine. I know people are going to take that quote out of context. It's the communities, obviously, and so forth. But we just live in an age where people do that.